I am convinced that you can only use them if you are already an expert in the Beatles. And what we will need, what this generation needs much more than the previous generation, is digital expertise. So, in general, I think you can only do this whole digital transformation and introduction of AI solutions with people.
I'm not a person.
Transparency is the most important issue we have. Transparency creates trust, and trust creates acceptance of our solutions. Creating fairness is incredibly important.
Dear viewers, this is our second interview that we are filming in Germany, in the town of Wieden in Bavaria. And as you know, the topic of marriage is very secret at the moment. Many people don't know what it's all about. Many are afraid of it. Some think they will soon be replaced by AI. And to get to the bottom of these questions, we would like to talk in more detail today with our guest, Jan Rother, who is head of AI at Witt-Gruppe. Thank you very much. As I briefly mentioned in my introduction, there's a lot of hype about this now. A lot of people are talking about it without really knowing much about it. You are an expert. So we have prepared a list of questions, and I would like to start with the first one.
It would be my pleasure.
How do you rate the current state of artificial intelligence development?
An exciting question, really, because there's a lot to say about it. And you can look at it from a lot of different angles, or you can look at it as it is. From my point of view, as you say, the hype was huge, and it still is in some cases. It begins to feel like it's going down a little bit. You can see from Nvidia's share price that it went down a bit and is now going up a bit. But on LinkedIn, as you just mentioned, there are so many posts and so many self-appointed experts who want to say something about it, especially in the direction of Gen AI. And then when you ask them about it, they may have seen the prompt somewhere about how it works. And then they say they are self-appointed experts in the field. What I think a lot of people should and need to understand is that AI is not just generative AI, not just ChatGPT, but everything behind it. ChatGPT is, of course, first and foremost Google's Gemini. But we're now at a stage where, let's say, it's no longer in its infancy, it's already at a preschool age. Let's see how much business impact the whole thing actually has, and how we can really monetize the whole thing with Gen AI and make money from it. I would describe us as being in the status phase right now, and it's a very, very critical phase because a lot was promised. And now let's see what has really come out of it. We at the Witt-Gruppe have calculated the business impact ourselves. We have done several AI cases in the last year, some with Gen AI, some without. Of course, where do we really need Gen AI? Not every problem has to be solved with a hammer, because we have a hammer, but sometimes we need a screwdriver in the end. And that's why you really have to spend time looking at where it's worth investing and where it's not. And we realize that there are a few use cases where Gen AI can really be integrated.
Thank you. In other words, you're already at the forefront of developments in artificial intelligence, so you're leading the way. My next question is, what key trends do you see coming over the next 3 to 5 years?
I see some AI trends coming. We are currently in a phase where we are moving from the era of digitalization to automation. This means that all the companies that are coming out must have achieved digitalization. In other words, they must have created the database to be able to use automation. These processes, or, as I said, automated processes. Without this foundation, it won't work. Without digitalization, which is the basis we have created, there will be no new trends in the end. As for me, the trends are definitely robotics, process automation, digitalization, and automation of business processes. Another trend is theory. In other words, making the whole thing explainable, transparent, and virtually dissolving the black box. So that we don't just say it works somehow, but that we understand how it works and why it works the way it does, and that's going to be a big issue. And then, of course, what I was just talking about is the integration of generative AI into solutions, data, and products at the end of the day. That means for us, for me, the Gen AI solution cannot stand alone. We need to build a data product that really solves a problem from start to finish, and not just take a piece of the problem and try to solve it, but really automate the whole thing from start to finish. That starts with content automation. In other words, when we use it to design a product, for example, the solution starts there with Gen AI, for example. And what you put in there from the data that we have, from the successful products that we have, can then be used to design new products and can also be designed specifically for other companies. Of course, this measurement of success based on KPIs is always included. In other words, we try to use these classic analyses that we have for product analysis. When does it work well? For which target group is it a good idea to start from scratch and then generate from these findings? In other words, to produce an image that is then automatically placed in the right formats, with the right copy, with the right SEO attributes. And that you have mapped out this entire route once with AI support in production. And of course, you can also play out the content. In other words, the issue of the marketing mix, or knowing what channels we need to use with what budget in order to achieve the greatest success with the product.
If I understand this correctly, this is actually an aid to human creativity. It's not the case that creativity will be replaced by an AI tool or Gen AI, as you say, but that it will mostly be used as a support.
I am convinced that you can only use Gen AI if you are already an expert in the field. In other words, I can use it to write a book, for example, if I don't have a sense of what a good book is or what makes a good book.
Or what moves people.
Or what moves people. Then I won't write a good book even with the help of Gen AI. It will write something for me and you may be able to read it and it will be quite good, but it will never be as good as something written by a real author. So I think you have to be an expert in your field to deal intelligently with this.
Jan, while we're on the subject of how this can be used specifically in your company, I'd like to ask how artificial intelligence can change or improve business processes.
We try to identify routine tasks that are currently, for example, copied from one Excel to another. Data is summarized in some other Excel, and then a PDF is generated from it again, which is then uploaded somewhere, and it's all done manually. And we want to parallel these issues as much as possible with automation at the end. We want to keep the old process, but build a new AI-based process in parallel so that at some point we can merge them and maybe replace the old one. All in the course of transformation. I think I'll come back to that later, how we take people with us, of course. That's a bit of the background to why we're doing things in parallel. We are trying to automate routine tasks, to automate AI-assisted tasks, to automate with machine learning. Of course, we need a database. We need the people who have to work with it and to make all these things easier, to make them faster, to give people more freedom so that they can do the really important tasks. Because for me, summarizing Excel or moving it somewhere, copying it, or converting it to PDF are not tasks that you really need to do on a daily basis these days.
This means that people still have more than enough time for creativity and creative tasks. And what industries do you think are currently most affected by the use of AI? And what might be in the future?
Well, the biggest industry? Actually, the whole of e-commerce industry is everyone who sells their products and services online. I think that's where the biggest impact of AI is going to be, because we just have a lot of data points. For example, in a store solution through Google Analytics, or through all the data you collect. We know relatively well from the data points what customers are doing, but we don't know why they're doing it. We have to figure that out with AI, but we know exactly what the customer journey is going to look like online. Because we have many data points, we can also create relatively good casting models, create good machines for the models, just because we know how to. The more exciting question, of course, is why it is the way it is. And that's where the data experts, the data scientists, the data analysts from the specialist departments have to work with us to interpret it and then draw the right conclusions. But e-commerce really does have a huge impact. We actually see that the Chinese are doing relatively well with AI in terms of generating the first products with TIMO, putting them online, and only then producing them. We in Germany are following a different path. We are going to produce our first products. We design first and think about what the index is and then bring it to the market. They go the other way, of course, with their philosophy, fast fashion, and that is the only way it works. That's for other people to answer. Yes, but this way of thinking is exciting. This also has to be taken into account in our process, as we then support the business processes with AI.
Can you generally say that this applies to all industries that have a lot of data?
Absolutely.
So AI is only practical where I have the opportunity to collect a lot of data about people's behaviour, evaluate and analyse it accordingly, and then build certain algorithms on this basis.
Yes, definitely. What I also see is healthcare. It makes perfect sense to me to digitize that and offer an AI-based solution. Diagnostics, imaging procedures that are available, or even writing letters from doctors, for example, which I think takes a lot of time. I think AI can definitely support the processes and ultimately add value. And I think that is the point. We need data, and we need the added value that we can generate from it. Because I don't think building an AI solution just for fun is going to help anybody in the end. Of course, the challenge we face in healthcare is that the whole thing has to be transparent. And I think that's exactly the point in healthcare. That we need transparency in how the AI is making the diagnosis, for example. I think that's very important for the treating doctors.
That's where we build a bridge to human characteristics. So you've already said that data is hugely important to the structure. These are career algorithms. And what qualities does an employee need to work in this area?
In general, I believe that this whole digital transformation and the implementation of AI solutions can only be achieved with people. We discussed this with Microsoft, and they said that 90% of AI solutions fail because of people. That's because it's not accepted, because people don't trust data, because they're afraid of losing their jobs, for example. And, of course, we will need digital communication and transformation, but we will also need different skills. For example, we will need to abstract more, we will need to think more, we will need to be more critical of what comes out of it. We will do that. We will have to work much more with the natural language. In other words, the more precisely we use language, the better our solutions will be until they are better. Also, in terms of the environment, the result. Then we are more precise. The more precise we can be, the better. So language will be used in all areas where AI is used, be it programming, be it healthcare, be it driving. The natural language will be used everywhere in the next few years. And that is a skill that we will absolutely need to be able to formulate precisely and accurately.
How can artificial intelligence improve customer experience? Now it's really in everyday life.
Yes, of course. It's a question we're practically asking ourselves right now. Can we make our customers happier, increase our turnover, or save costs? The fact that we have a relatively high level of customer service because we are not as involved in congresses at the moment is also a factor. A little bit because of our products and our target group. But of course, we are trying to look at all the touch points we have with the customer. Can we somehow optimize this with AI? Make it better, make it more beautiful. That's what we're working on, of course. The first thing that comes to mind is bots. Whether it's chatbots, voice boards, etc., everything can be done with AI these days, including Gen AI, of course. And these are the main things that we are looking at now because we say we see a lot of potential there. We see a lot of cost saving on our side, and we can maybe optimize customer experience again. Another point is that fashion retailers and fashion manufacturers are the biggest pain points for customers. That's what we told ourselves. Sizing online. In other words, they know they've ordered a 48, and in the end, it still doesn't fit because the size is different for every garment. That is the nature of clothing, and we can do a lot with AI. We can look at the purchase history and say, this is what they bought. These are the sizes that came back, and they kept them, and they seem to fit. And then we can see what styles have roughly the same fit, so we can personalize what would fit. In terms of size, in general, personalization is a big issue for us, which we are working on. In other words, we want to present and display the products in the best possible way, on the website, in the catalogue, and in all the touch points that we have with the customer, but also in retail, actually in the local retail. And then we try and do it as well as we can. The products that customers need will at least be available. In other words, we have it in the range, in the assortment, and that, combined with the right size, should lead to a better customer experience.
That's true. I was going to say that. It is also a big difficulty, especially because different manufacturers have completely different patterns. And as you rightly said, size 48 is not exactly the same for one manufacturer as it is for another. And so in general, you can say that every customer who works with your services actually feels personally addressed, or at least has the feeling that they are being addressed personally. Through this experience. And if you get a little more specific, what tools or platforms do you think are particularly effective at the moment?
So, of course, this is something that everyone working in AI needs to know. So, what are the names of specific programming languages? The ones that a data scientist, but also a data engineer, needs to know, of course. There's no way around it. But there are a lot of no-code, low-code solutions in use these days. And there are also specialist departments being set up to work more intensively with them and produce their own solutions. Of course, this has to be built into the corporate structure and architecture, and we have to know what is going on. That's you out there. But in principle, we are already moving quite strongly in the direction of just thinking about the code logo, because we can just use a SaaS solution on the market, which I can only recommend. It makes perfect sense, but it also makes perfect sense if you're not a startup, or if you're already building your own platform in the SME sector. That means having all the solutions that you have bundled together centrally somewhere so that you have an overview of the costs, so that you have transparency. And then you have something like Google Cloud Platform. I think Alex has something like that now, and there are different services, machine services, image recognition services. Of course, they all cost money. The cloud always costs money, but it makes perfect sense to use it so you don't have to do everything yourself. Doing it yourself always costs a lot of time and a lot of money. And there are these ready-made services that you can use that you can train yourself relatively easy. And that's something you should definitely take advantage of.
Thank you very much. In your first answer, you also touched briefly on the topic of explainable AI. So I would like you to touch on that as well. What is explainable AI? Transparent AI, now in the corporate or social environment?
Yes, transparency is the most important issue for us. Transparency creates trust, and trust ensures that our solutions are accepted. In the customer's specialist department, everyone needs to know how AI works, what KPIs are used, and what the end result is. We ourselves say that we have to communicate a lot internally. We have created a community where we explain use cases, where we look at products on the market together with the specialist departments, where we organize events to explain AI. How does that work? What are the fixed terms that need to be explained? What is the difference between Gen AI and traditional AI? We have done this before, and we need to do it again because we want to keep up to date with what is being developed. This creates transparency and a common level of knowledge within the company, so that everyone knows what we are actually talking about when we are talking about AI. What possibilities does AI offer us? This is the only way we can get to use cases, and the whole thing has to be explainable in the end. In other words, we have to build our solutions in such a way that we can understand them ourselves, but the non-technical department also understands what is going on. This allows us to create transparency and trust in the data products that we create. And that is the only way we can be effective.
Yes, now we're on the subject, this strange, familiar image of the state, especially as far as Germany is concerned. We're all used to Germany having such beautiful medieval cities. Will this be influenced by AI in the future? Will we see a whole new infrastructure? Will cars look different? Will houses look different? Or will they stay the same as they are now?
So I think things will change, but perhaps not so much on the surface, but more in the infrastructure of how automated cars and autonomous cars will be able to drive. They will need clearer, more recognizable rules of the road, which are less common in medieval cities. They tended to be built on the way they grew, which works better in more modern cities like those in the USA, which were built on the principle that it works better for cars. In Germany, we are more likely to see smaller changes. It will be easier to interact with in Germany. We are more likely to see smaller changes. It will be easier to interact with the mobile phone or whatever the successor to the mobile phone will be, that you have more content, that you can explain how old a house is, for example, and what the history of the house is, even if you don't realize that you can already use a mobile phone today. And with AI, of course, it becomes much more dynamic, much better. There was Google Glass, which was relatively simple along the edge of the glasses. Maybe it will go in that direction again.
That means this and that development with chips. It's also a very hot topic at the moment. Will it really be possible for people who simply have these chips in their brains to be able to read each other's thoughts? Or perhaps share content with each other? How likely is that?
There has been a lot of research in this area, and we can already see, sometimes schematically, what a person is thinking when they concentrate on a picture and imagine the picture, which we can then trigger, so to speak. Ah, yes, that is the image, exactly what the person is thinking. And of course, this development will continue. In the near future, we will have a pretty good idea of how our brain works, how our own neural network is structured, shall I say. We are still in the early stages of research, but we are already on an exciting, interesting path.
Let's take a break. You are watching Andersen RnD channel, where we talk to people shaping the future. Our company, Andersen, collaborates with leading global brands and takes part in exciting projects across the globe. Have you heard of NEOM or the Red Sea project? These initiatives have gained worldwide recognition, and Andersen is seeking to participate in projects like this. Recently, I traveled to Saudi Arabia as part of our team to build new partnerships and participate in one of the country's groundbreaking urban planning projects. Together with our partners, we discussed how we could help bring this ambitious vision to life. We are looking forward to a productive collaboration. Follow us on Andersen RnD channel for further updates. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
I don't want to leave the topic of AI completely, but I would like to move on to the topic of digital transformation, because it is also being talked about everywhere. What is important for a successful digital transformation? And what is generally understood by this in the context of a company?
Sometimes I feel like everyone understands something different about it. For me, it's really about doing your homework on the basics. That means having nothing analog, having as much digital as possible, having a disadvantaged database, having data at all, and having governance and having a strategy. And I think the most important thing is to get people on board so they understand what's going on, how their working environment is changing as a result, how their processes are changing because of digitalization, that we are making everything more digital, that we have digital processes, that we have automated processes. A lot is changing in a company, but a company 20 years ago did not work the same way as a company does today. It's completely different. We no longer have faxes, we have emails. I hope no more faxes are sent. Emails will probably be replaced by direct messaging at some point because it is so much easier and faster. A lot will change. And as I said, it's now about laying the foundations, building data warehouses that are scalable, that are cost-effective, that we can work with, that we can build AI solutions with. Not every data warehouse is designed to do that. Maybe we need to rethink that and create some kind of governance around it. And what I was saying earlier is that ultimately, the most important thing about digital transformation is people. Otherwise, this transformation will fail if you forget to take them with you and explain what we are doing and why we are doing it. What is our vision? What is our strategy? Where do we want to be in 5 years when the transformation is complete? Is there a point in time for transformation? Have we said what has to be digital for us to be transformed? We still have the advantage that we have a lot of catalogs. That means we actually send paper catalogs to our customers. That means we're not quite as digital, but also because it works, because it means we're a bit of a counter-trend to the market and we don't just do everything online. And we also have an online solution, of course, and an online store and an app and so on. But our main business is still the catalogue, and that's probably not going to change for the next 5 or 6 years. And so we have the time now, because we are very good operationally at what we do, to prepare for the whole digitalization with the catalogue. This means that we can build our online shop in peace, integrate an AI solution, and ask our customers what they want from the online shop. We're in a very comfortable position right now because we have the resources and the budget to do the whole transformation without disrupting our operations.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are now on the subject of communication between different IT teams. You are the head of the department responsible for AI, but you also have colleagues in other IT departments. How do all these departments work together?
Again, communication is key. This means that we have to design processes in such a way that the citizens are relatively new and fresh, as they will be in many companies, and that they are very well integrated into product development. That means we need regular workshops on this, of course. How can we improve our processes? How can we communicate more effectively? And above all, how can we integrate the business needs of the specialist department in a meaningful way? In other words, the requirement comes from the specialist department. Do we need AI for that? Do we need a model? Do we just need a decision tree, to put it simply? What exactly should the end result be? I think that this requirements management is very, very important for the whole IT department in order to then connect the right IT departments, communicate with them, and integrate them into the process. Of course, we have to consider whether it will help the company. Are the resources available if we want to do the whole thing? Or do we already have 50 other projects going on in parallel to get the whole thing up and running? The next important point is the exchange with the specialist department. In other words, we always need a business lead and a technical lead, and they need to work closely together. So much so that we have our data scientists sitting in the specialist departments to adapt and develop products, to understand exactly what needs to be done, because without that technical assessment and the know-how that comes from the specialist department, it is difficult to build a useful data product or find a solution.
What this means in practice is that a requirement may come from the business, but after careful consideration, it may be found that the solution is either not efficient or not technically feasible. And then you just move on to other ideas.
Exactly. We simply have to have a preliminary phase. For example, we have to take a very rough look at whether we can do this at all. Do we already have data? I think as a company we need to reorganize, redesign, migrate to another cloud solution, or whatever. And then we have to ask ourselves, can we do it? Does our data allow us to resolve this requirement from the specialist department? For example, for prepayment, etc. Usually yes, but we've really had a case where we've said, well, that's not technically possible, then it's probably somewhere else.
In other words, there is both a top-down and bottom-up input, if you can put it that way. In other words, there may well be an initiative from some kind of department to change something or recommend something. And that brings me to my next question. How does this affect the internal corporate culture in general?
The corporate culture is changing dramatically, I would say. We come from a more traditional company, which is now here in the Upper Palatinate, very local, also recruiting. What we still do, and certainly still prefer, is to take a more global approach and say we are now looking at Spain, we are looking at Poland to see what we can do. And there are cultural differences simply because of that, but also because of the whole digitalization process. And again, what I was saying earlier, communication is the be-all and end-all. Talking about it, addressing mistakes, addressing grievances, and simply addressing improvements. And I think that's a very important cultural change that needs to happen, from a more authoritarian leadership to a more welcoming, open leadership. Less micromanagement. Hey, we need your ideas, we need your cooperation at the point where you have to work together functionally, and you have to put yourself on the back burner a bit. As an employee, as a manager, of course. But I think the right way to do it is to really help shape the transformation and not just do it from the top down. We have a vision that's set by management, that's roughly where we want to be, but the co-design and the specific design has to come from the bottom, of course. So who does what, where and how? What is the right way to go? In the end, everyone has to pull together.
And could you perhaps give some examples of successful digital transformation? Not just the example of your own company, which I assume is the case anyway, but also, let's say, well-known examples where you can say, yes, they did it.
Yes, it's difficult because where do you put it? The target point is this.
A system unlike any other.
How do we measure it? Where is the real end? Where do we say that we have been transformed? I think that's relatively difficult. There are many large companies in Germany that have invested heavily in this. They have set up innovation centers. Here in Hamburg, Siemens has built a big AI and robotics factory, which is very cool. We try to do a lot of innovation ourselves, of course, by looking at use cases and testing them and so on, and taking people with us and being ready. But when are you really online? When do you have state-of-the-art online solutions? Tomorrow can be very different. What we have seen with Google, for example, is the customer advisor who appears on the website and then advises the customer. Now, we have asked our customers, do you want this? And they said, no, we don't. My sister is my customer consultant. Maybe it's not so bad for some people. For example, those who are in an industry that's not really relevant to us. In that case, I think it's difficult to find the right balance and say we're successful now.
What can you recommend to companies that are about to implement AI or have already started? What mistakes do you think can be avoided in this initial phase and in general?
First of all, I would say the homework, for example, the database, and we have already talked about this. The most important thing is to create a data structure that can be used for output without a proper database. In fact, these partial solutions will not work. In fact, you'll fail before you even start. The second thing is to get people on board. In other words, what are the specific needs of the business? What really helps us move forward? Why are we doing all this? I think we should never stop. Why ask questions about this introduction and about AI solutions? Why are we doing this? Do we need reality? Isn't it much easier to use another method to avoid costs? Of course, it is. And to get people to accept the solution. Because we have built a lot of good solutions in the past, they work very well. In some cases, they worked better than what the department did manually. In most cases, they did, but they were not accepted by the department. We asked ourselves, why weren't they accepted if our solution generates more revenue? Ultimately, and most importantly, it was the statement that we don't trust data, we don't trust output. We are no longer involved in calculation, for example, and so we don't trust the whole thing. And that's why, for example, it's very important for us to have this fictitious person. That means monitoring, creating transparency through countable AI. An important point is to have confidence. What you also have to think about is the design of the solution, really what it looks like at the end, because a lot of people just build a chatbot. And then we have another piece of information, and then another piece of information, and here's something else that we don't really need. Probably because it doesn't meet their needs. For example, users just want an answer to their question. They don't need 5,000 buttons or anything like that. And Gen AI, for example, did that very well. They kept it relatively simple. Just like Google, which does it relatively simply with a search bar. And I think you definitely need that kind of basic design understanding for AI solutions. It creates acceptance of the solution and ultimately trust. What you also need, of course, is a bit of support and commitment from management.
And what ethical issues does this raise? Because a lot of people are now talking about this ethics law that I think now has been passed in the EU. So you know, or you can clearly see that this also has a lot to do with ethical issues. And what questions do you think this raises?
So the best example, especially in the area of general design, is always in the direction of image generation. For example, if we say, I want an older woman with clothes walking along the beach, what kind of image will come out of that? Of course, only the one it has been trained with. And most people on the internet are white people of a certain age, with a certain look, facial structure, etc. And that's what's going to come out as the output. Unless you specify it again, of course. But the basic thing is, I wouldn't say discriminatory, because that's not the right word at this point. But creating fairness is incredibly important. That is, sharpening up, if you like, in the database, and getting reasonable results is very important. Even when we think about names, there is a lot of discrimination. And we can transfer this discrimination to AI if we're not careful. For example, according to one study, applicants who do not have a German name are rejected more often. In Germany, for example, when looking for a job or an apartment. And if we train with this data so that we automatically reject all names that are not Miller or Schmidt, then we have created a discriminatory AI without intending to. Maybe even because we have simply not taken care of the database. But that's why I say we've got to have a proper database. That is the be-all and end-all, the most important thing we have to have.
And when it comes to children and the use of different mobile phones or digital devices in general, do you think this should start as early as possible? There are a lot of controversial opinions now. Some people say that children should start as late as possible. Some want them to start in kindergarten. I mean, The easy solution is probably not the right one. What do you think about that?
It's a difficult question, and I don't think it's a simple yes or no. And from now on, we have to give every child a tablet or every child an iPhone. I don't think that's the case at all. Children are all different. They all have their own rhythm of development, their own stage of development, and what we need, what this generation, the next generation needs much more than the last generation, is digital literacy. Research will have to decide exactly when to start. But I think that digital literacy, how does an iPhone, knowledge, AI work? Where does the computer work? What can a program do? What are the limitations of the program? Just a link, what can I do with it? That competence has to be there to be able to evaluate what it is for. Is there a future? What can I develop and where can I integrate AI into my everyday life in the future? For example, if a child wants to be a chef, where can they help to design digital solutions or use them in their work? And I think this is much stronger than it used to be. On the other hand, of course, we must not neglect social skills. In other words, growing up today is much more complex than it was 20 years ago, because it feels like you have to take into account a lot more skills that the child will eventually use or even need.
But you don't believe in this development? That in the future all people will flee into this metaverse and then create an avatar for themselves, which will then go and have a beer with your avatar, if you like?
No, I don't believe in that. So I know that there are a lot of experts on LinkedIn who are fans of metaverse. I don't really believe in it, not in its current state, because it's just not a problem for me because there's no business case behind it. And as I said, people are just losing too much of that social component. Of course, you can do video therapy and psychotherapy these days. But it's still nicer to be there, sitting together in a cafe.
Or walking through the city, as we're doing now, just listening to the sounds of nature.
All sorts of senses that perceive things. Sense of smell, sense of touch. So to be careful not to get run over and to be aware of what we need and what we are in the end.
It makes people into human beings.
Exactly. We are social beings and we always will be. And it will be difficult to create an AI or a digital solution for that. At the same time, AI or a digital solution really has to be a solution to a problem that we have. I'm not a fan of doing housework. I really need a robot to do the housework for me, to do the laundry, to put clothes in and out of the machine, and to clean the bathroom. And that's something I'm still missing, that we're thinking in that direction.
Me too.
It's time I would use to get on with my personal life. It's too much for me.
Too much? After all, if someone says, I'll just paint my own walls, they can certainly do that.
There will be no ban on this.
Yes, Jan. Great. Thank you for this tour of AI today. And also, thank you for inviting me to see a bit of the city. I really enjoyed it.
That's why I had so much fun. And I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you.